Hello there, Experience. Welcome to the Experience. Today I want to talk about Love is Blind, season 3 of Love is Blind, which is a Netflix series where people who are hoping to find love, basically they participate in the experiment, which believes that, that love is blind, but that, some of the reasons why people don't find people who are compatible with them or people that it actually ends up working out with is because when you're in the real world and you can see people, you tend to focus on things like looks and all of that. But if you put all of that aside and you just create this environment where people are only connecting based on the connection they are feeling, based on the conversations they're having with these people that they're connecting with, then the chances of success are higher, and finding people that you're truly compatible with is much more possible through that kind of setup. So that is what Love is Blind is essentially about, for those who might not know. I'm a huge fan of the show, and it's been interesting actually to see in some ways the caliber of the people they featured, in some ways going up, in some ways deteriorating. It's been very interesting, but essentially I just want to talk about, in this video I just want to talk about because I think most people have explored the usual, they've done character sketches, on the people who were on the show this year and all of that, and they've reviewed the relationships. And so I just want to do something slightly different in that I just want to focus true villains of this season, where I think it's always a fun thing to look at, not because the idea is to shame and name people, but it's always interesting to see, because even with the previous season, when you looked at people who were considered to have been unfair or selfish, or it turned out to be, there was a 360 when you actually looked at the I don't know what they call the episode, but basically after the reunion, like a year later, when they revisit the couples to see how they've been doing after a year of the experiment and marriage, with those who did get married, got married. And so you could see how certain people that had been viewed as victims, for example, there was a shift. You could see in the real world that, wait a minute, wasn't this person the one that we sort of like sympathize with or felt was wronged? So I feel like there's that element in this season as well. So I just want to look at who are the true villains. Well, according to me anyway, who are the true villains in this season of Love is Blind? To clarify, I don't mean a villain in a sense that it's someone who's like capable of murder, someone who's like a thief, or no, not in that sinister sense, but in a sense that on TV, we often have good characters and bad characters. So I mean in that sense. So let's actually get into the discussion. Villain number 1, I would say, is Baptiste. Not because he's a horrible person. I mean, he definitely is a good person. We saw a lot of good sides of Baptiste, and I really think that he's got like a lot of good qualities that possibly make him a good partner, will make him a good partner when he does find someone that he feels is worth saying yes to. But I personally cannot ignore how he treated Nancy. I mean, for the most part, I think he is a gentleman, and he really, he did the good stuff, the basic stuff. You could see that he was present. You could see that he genuinely took an interest in her life and all of that, which are good qualities and are good things for anyone to experience from someone they're getting to know, or engaged to be married to. So that was good. But my thing is with Baptiste is that he presents this idea that he's obviously a family guy, and he's very close with his sister and his mother, seemingly, which is great. We love that, because then in most cases people like that tend to treat women a little bit better. But I don't feel like that translated as well as it could have when it came to how he related to Nancy and well, what went down. Essentially, for me, Wade just started going south and was very clear that perhaps he really wasn't going to say yes. And personally, I was kind of hoping he wouldn't say yes. In fact, I thought they both wouldn't say yes. But that particular scene where he tells Nancy, I mean, he was upfront and he was open. And that's the crazy thing, that looking at that alone, you would think, well, but isn't it great that he was open about the whole thing and he didn't hide anything? Yes, we love honesty, but you must also look at what was said, and the manner in which it was said. In that particular scene on the bed with Nancy, he was basically, in a lot of words, like a lot of circles, saying that, Nancy wasn't good enough and probably was never going to be good enough because she's not the kind of woman that he would ever go for in the real world. And for me it was a very hurtful thing because, first of all, it goes against the basic principles of the concept, or the experience of Love is Blind, because you're there to not find people that you would like or match with in the real world. It hasn't worked. That's why you're there. Because if it was working, if you were finding compatibility and you were finding connections that are above surface level in the real world, what would you be doing on the experiment, right? So for me, it was just also, it made him seem very superficial that he came to the show because he said that he was trying to look outside of that superficial basis of looking for love, right? And then he goes on to say, you are not the kind of girl I would link up with, and Raven is more of the girl that I would go up to. And then, because apparently that wasn't worse enough, he then goes on to say that basically he was labeling himself as a hot guy. I mean, sure, granted, he is good looking, but first of all, who says that about themselves? Like, who says that about themselves? It's just such a very superficial and a very, I don't know, there's something very funny about people who can say that about themselves, that I'm the kind of person that if I walk into a bar, heads would turn and people would go for me and make their moves on me. I mean, I can't imagine having a healthy relationship. Like, I can't imagine not being a narcissist and be able to say that. For me, it's such a totally narcissistic thing to say. But anyway, so such things that, I mean, I was listening to and observing about him, and I thought, this guy can't be serious. This guy cannot be serious. But yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next villain, according to me. And then there was Zeneb. Yeah, I think that's, let's say Zay. Yes, as Cole will say, it's Zay, just to avoid butchering people's names. So Zay is one of those people that we would have initially looked at. Well, let me not say we. I initially looked at as having been dealt a raw deal. But I don't know. I now have mixed emotions because when it comes to her, because there's a lot that I feel was probably misconstrued between her and Cole. So I'm just gonna focus solely on what she said, right, at the reunion, because that's something that she said, or something that came out of her mouth. So she basically was painting the picture that Cole had disrespected her, had made her devalue herself, basically shattered her confidence as a woman, in herself as a woman. And then she goes on to talk about how she had even started changing her eating patterns, just so that she could kind of live up to what seemed to have been his expectations of her, or from her, right? And I mean, obviously you hear that. I mean, no woman, I think, would hear that and feel like, oh, what a great guy. So we all thought, Cole, how could you do that? That's a very sick thing to do. How do you make a woman feel like she's not good enough as she is, or that she needs to look a certain way, and she has to eat in a certain way so that she can look or maintain a certain look, and only then will you find her attractive, because that's a picture that was painted. But then when you start looking at the context, it's very clear though that there was a build up. That's the thing that makes it complicated between Cole and Zay. It's very clear that there was a build up of things that probably then led her to having this idea that Cole was treating her this way, or was, suggesting things subtly, such as eat like don't eat this much, or eat this, or not that, But yeah, so it's such a very interesting dynamic. It really is, because we can't absolve Cole of the fact that he did, contribute to how she ended up feeling about herself, and feeling like she wasn't good enough, or that it was only if she looked a certain way that he would be attracted to her, or would give her a 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, as a woman that he was going to marry. But because he did say that very clear that Colleen was the kind of girl that would be would get all the ticks from him as a woman that he's attracted to, which is a pretty, I don't know why he thought it was okay to say that, but he did say it, and it obviously landed the way in which it did land, and we can't blame Zay for feeling some type of way after that. But yeah, so there's that element to consider in terms of Cole's contribution and how Zay ended up feeling about the whole thing. But now looking at the the cutie's story, or the footage rather, it was the complete opposite of what she had described. But that's why I say that it's such a complicated thing, because now when you look at that footage, you see that that's not what he was doing. He was actually being a concerned, not even, was it a concerned thing, but basically in that footage, what we see is they are interacting about the wedding preparations. They're talking about their families who will be flying in and out and all of that, just discussing the logistics about that. And first of all, she wasn't even paying attention to what he was saying. He seemed more concerned about discussing the logistics than she did, if we're being honest. He basically was talking about how they had dinner plans, and he wanted obviously to enjoy the food they would be having. So yeah, you don't want to ruin your appetite for that. That's essentially what it was. And that's something that personally I would also say, to my partner, that hey, we are going out for dinner later, so maybe we shouldn't, we should save our appetite for that, so that we can enjoy the food that we've been looking forward to having, for the special dinner that we've planned. It's not an unreasonable thing to say. There was no element, both in how he said it and in what he said, that qualified the idea that he's controlling what she's eating, or so that she can maintain a certain weight, or whatever it is that was the motive, that could have been the motive of controlling someone's eating patterns. So it was very interesting actually to see the contrast between what had been described to us and what actually did transpire. So yeah, that to me does kind of make Zay a bit of a villain, because she was dealt a bit of an unfortunate card, because you have this person that you care deeply about and who cares about you as well, but you're essentially not good enough for them, right? And now it's a build up of that, and it's probably also playing through your mind now and again, and everything else that could somewhat be connected to that, to those words, will obviously seem to be perceived. It will be perceived a certain way because of that initial conversation about how you're not the person he would go for. So it's understandable, but I just feel like at the end of the day, she was not as much of a victim as she was painting herself to be. And I think for me, then that is why I would put her on this list of, villains that we did not see initially, but ended up actually giving villain vibes. Then I want to talk about Matt. Matt is an interesting one. He's a very interesting character. Definitely has a lot of suppressed anger issues. But I think he seems to be a great guy. He really does seem to be a great guy. But obviously, because of the unfortunate infidelity that he's experienced in his past relationship, where he was the one on the receiving end of the partner being unfaithful, it's definitely obviously made him trust less. It's definitely made him more cautious. It's definitely made him a ticking time bomb. And it's concerning because you don't know what he might ever do with that kind of build up of the anger and the hurt from over the years and all of that. That for me is where it gets concerning with him, because he might not, because like I said, he seems to be a terrific guy, so he might not intend to ever cause harm in whatever way that might transpire. But I mean, who's to say when it comes to these things? He might end up doing it anyway, even though he doesn't intend to, because there's just so much that's a build up. So I tend to agree with those who say that Matt probably needs to go on an individual healing journey where he deals with what he's experienced in the past, because he's clearly still not quite ready to be with someone, because being with someone, especially committing marriage to them, part of it, as much as I may not have had that experience, I mean, logically I know that part of it means that you have to trust. Part of it means that you have to let go of control, let go of the idea that you can control what the other person can do or can think, and you just have to let them be and let them love you the way they love you. And there is obviously there are things that you can teach each other about how you feel most loved, right? But at the end of the day, we all experience love in different ways, and part of committing to someone is accepting that those ways will not always be like, they will not always match 100%, in terms of how we may expect. But it's for you to decide how fundamental it is, or how maybe not so monumental it is, that you can let it go, right? So I mean, yeah, so clearly trust is still a very big thing in Matt. And understandably, I mean, he did go through a traumatic experience, right, in his past relationship. But I just feel like he, first of all, he kind of emotionally manipulates Colleen. So yeah, so what Colleen did was not okay, right? Because it was crossing a boundary. She was with Matt now and had promised commitment to Matt. But now she was still now saying things that are not okay to say to someone else, if you've committed your life to another person. So we granted that was not okay, and we're not saying she should get a medal for that. But there was then like an element of emotional manipulation from Matt, having experienced that with Colleen, because now he's storming out, now he's packing things up, he's leaving, he's done. It was very yeah, it was just like tactics that people use, I guess, to try and put you on a leash, and well, definitely to guilt trip you because of what you've done. But yeah, it's there are a lot of elements in his behavior, and he didn't do it once, he did it twice, if I'm not mistaken. He did it twice, and seen how they actually are in their real lives, and in how they've intertwined their lives. But to me, it is interesting, and it would be nice to see how the dynamics are in their relationship now. Does he storm out? Because he gives me those vibes, like he's the kind of person who's not gonna, you're gonna, argue about something, and then you make dinner, and then they won't eat. They won't eat because they're upset. that you guys are not on the same page about something. He gives me those vibes, and I find that to be very abusive. And importantly, what it speaks is that the person is against you as as an individual in how you guys are not seeing eye to eye, rather than against the problem. Because when you are against the problem but you're still on the same page with, in terms of how committed you are to the person, and in terms of how committed you are to you guys having a healthy relationship, you're not going to behave like that, right? You're going to tackle the problem together, as a committed couple who's trying to have a healthy relationship. But the moment you start shutting off like that, especially if you're not communicating that you need space, but you're just like shutting off, it's not okay. You know, there's a lot of a lot of what emotional abuse in that kind of behavior. So it would be interesting to know if like there is still that dynamic in their relationship now that they are back into the real world, or maybe actually, I don't know, maybe we're concerned for nothing. I don't know. I'm just exploring what I've observed, and yeah. So that actually brings me to the end of this little video about Love is Blind season 3, and who I consider to be the true villains in the season, because yeah, there's no season without a villain or two. But yeah, great season. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to see where the couples are in a year from now, and I look forward to season 4. It really is, the experience is really quite a great one. I think it's giving people a chance to experience love in ways they would not perhaps experience it in the real world, where we're all concerned about how a person looks. We're concerned about, you know, things like people's earnings. We're concerned about the cars that people drive, and superficial things like that. Not to say they shouldn't matter. They can matter, and they are important. We can't also pretend that they don't have certain value, you know. But, you know, what about the connection? Where does the emotional connection come in at the end of the day, when all we're looking at are the external things, right? So that's why I believe in the experiment. As to whether I do it or not, the jury is still out. But other than that, I'm a true fan of the franchise, and I hope that it grows from strength to strength, and I hope the caliber of the people they cast on the show will get better. And we'll have people who are really serious about the experiment and are committed to the experiment, so that we can actually, yeah, it would be very restoring. It would restore our confidence in the concept, you know, to see more and more of people who are actually true to the purpose and the basis of the experiment, rather than still looking for what is on the outside, what they looked for in the outside, but also wanting to be part of the experiment. But anyway, so that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, for coming to the end of the video with me. Please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've got any thoughts about my video and the topic that I've been discussing. See you on the next one. Thank you.